Welcome, and thank you for joining us today for the No Blue, No Green session, which recognises World Environment Day and World Ocean Day. My name is Ricky Herzberg from Plastic Oceans Australasia, and I'll be your host today in conversation with my special guests, Dan Abbott, Dr. Paul Harvey, and Nicola Chollis. Before we begin, I would like to start by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today and pay my respects to the elders, past and present. I extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people here today. So, why, you might wonder, did we name today's chat No Blue, No Green? Well, did you know, I'm sure most of you do, that our bodies are made up of around 70% water? Our planet is also around 70% water, and more than 50% of the oxygen that we breathe is created from the big blue. So in essence, we are all water, and here I am underwater as well. We wish to acknowledge the interconnectedness of blue and green because without our ocean, rivers and water bodies and waterways, we wouldn't have our green. That doesn't just mean our green spaces, our forests, mountains, but also us. The oceans play a critical role in our daily lives. And that is why this year we are so delighted that United Nations has aligned the World Environment Day theme, which is Beat Plastic Pollution, and the World Ocean Day theme, Planet Ocean, Tides Are Changing, together. By joining the dots, it helps to further raise awareness that our big blue is in distress, primarily due to one major man-made, land-based, indestructible pollutant, plastic. Working together, we wish to ensure that there will always be a healthy blue and a lush green for all to enjoy and, of course, to be able to exist. So without further ado, it is now my great pleasure to introduce our special guests to have a hearty chat about all things blue and green. Dan, Dr. Paul and Nicola will be chatting with me initially one-on-one, and then we will have an open forum at the end, followed by a short film created by some of our amazing individuals who are doing lots to help save the planet. So there's lots to share with you. We'll probably be running for about 60 minutes, so I hope you stay with us to go through the journey. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Dan. So Dan Abbott. Dan, you're an amazing man. You are, I know, originally from the UK. You're a world-renowned documentary and wildlife filmmaker, an underwater cinematographer, a public speaker with a special interest, I know, with shark behaviour and their importance in our ocean. And also, I know myself as a scuba diver, my first interaction with the grey-nosed shark, and it was like amazing. Loved it. And Dan, I know that you currently reside in Spain. You're working on a project called Save the Med. And you also are, which we're most excited about, you also are a judge for the 2023 UNESCO endorsed Ocean in Motion film competition, which we'll talk about a bit later. So Dan, there's so much we could talk about. We could spend a whole hour just chatting with you about all your experiences. So obviously I need to just cut to the chase and ask you a couple of questions. And I think maybe the one that's probably most interesting is where you are right now. And I'd love to know what are the challenges that you're finding with what's happening for you and what you see in Save the Med?
Sure, yeah. Hello, everyone. Thanks for having me. Yeah, one of the biggest challenges that we have here in the Med is similar to all the challenges that everyone else around the world experiences, like climate change, plastic pollution, overfishing, but on a much more concentrated level. It's a smaller sea, and there are so many different countries that border the sea that use it and have their own ideas and their own laws and their own ways of how they want to interact with it. So trying to get that collaboration and that cooperation is very, very challenging. And yeah, that is probably the hardest part. Local communities seem to be the gateway to solving those issues, and that's where most of the work that we do at Save the Med is based.
So you've been there for a few years now. So I would say, you know, have you actually noticed any positive changes in biodiversity or the marine habitat systems?
I mean, in the time I've been here, I've been here 4 years, which is quite a short amount of time for seeing kind of clear visual representation of how biodiversity is changing. But there's certainly a huge noticeable difference between areas that have been under protection for a little while and areas that have no protection at all. In the marine reserves in Mallorca, where I'm based, the biodiversity is extraordinary, and there's clearly so much more life, and you see so many more creatures, and it's an amazing place to be underwater. It's probably one of the best dive spots, like in the Balearic Islands, where I live. And then the difference with areas where you are allowed to fish, you are allowed to spearfishermen are allowed to operate, or whatever it is, the difference is huge. So the positives are where areas have been protected for a period of time, the ocean has clearly been able to recover and has clearly been able to bounce back and kind of rebuild itself. And in some places, it hasn't really taken too long, only a matter of years.
That's fascinating, because I know that you've done diving and filming all over the world, and even like, South Africa, and you've been in a lot of different locations. I mean, in all of the years and what you've seen, have you noticed, and are you able to share with us impacts that you've noticed regarding plastic that you see in the sea and on land?
Sure, yeah. I mean, plastic is becoming quite a normal thing to see on a dive. It's not unusual to swim past a bottle or a bag while you're down there. In fact, last night I was filming a common stingray aggregation, and you have to swim through a little channel of plastic before you can even get out to the area that we were filming. Yeah, it's everywhere. That's clear. I think the actual direct impact that it has on marine life is also quite clear, not just when you're seeing a plastic bottle floating through the sea, but also things like discarded fishing gear plays a huge part of discarded plastic pollution. And we see a lot of that here, especially with creatures like sea turtles, loggerhead turtles we get here, that are entangled in discarded fishing gear. Here they're known as FADs, fish aggregating device, and they are just death traps. And that's a huge problem with what I was saying before about all the different countries that use the Mediterranean for their fishing. Some are trying to protect turtles, some are trying to catch and eat turtles, because that's part of their kind of heritage and culture. So it's a very challenging dynamic to try and solve.
So do you think there is there a way that the communities or the local authorities are working together in the different countries to try and assimilate and collaborate to try and make a change, so that there's a unified approach with what you're talking about? Because it sounds like it's a bit of a melting pot.
Yeah, it is. It definitely is. I think the key area is having people based in the different areas that then have some link to places like Brussels, where policy change can actually be implemented. So a lot of that requires a lot of data, and data is the part that takes the longest to get and requires people on the ground. This isn't something that that kind of government officials can do. This is the stuff that the people working on ground level with communities that speak to local fishermen on a daily basis, like the actual nuts and bolts, the actual roll up your sleeves and do the work kind of places. That's where the data comes from. So that takes quite a lot of time. But yes is the short answer to your question, because we absolutely can make changes, and changes are being made based on this sort of data, but only when there's enough to be able to then be able to present it to places like Brussels, that can then make a positive impact.
So who's gathering the data? Is that something that you need from all the different authorities in all those different municipalities, all the different countries? How does
Yes.
that work?
Yeah, it's something that we are still on a learning journey about at Save the Med. Is finding those NGOs or those individuals that are, one, willing for collaboration, that's fairly key, and willing to share and kind of be part of something a little bit bigger. That's the bit that takes a lot of time, and it's all down to relationship building. That's kind of the key, the critical side of it.
So I suppose there must be a level of frustration and patience required from yourself, being in various locations around the world over so many years. It must be, hard for you personally, with your profession, to see things move very slowly, or maybe even going backwards since the pandemic.
Maybe a little bit. I would say, because I am my primary job is to film it. So from that side, the frustration from me isn't usually based around whether people are working together or not, although I see it quite close up whether it's working or not. From my side, the bigger frustration is when you go to an area where there should be a certain animal, but there isn't anymore, or you're seeing so few numbers that it's impossible to film or get shots that represents the problem that you're trying to, the story that you're trying to tell. In different parts of the world, I've certainly seen good bits and bad bits, but it's always, the collaboration side is always where the good bits are happening. And I have to say that here in the Med, especially here in Mallorca, this is probably the most collaborative environment I've ever experienced in terms of NGOs, organisations working together towards the same goals. There was even just a meeting yesterday at our office, loads of people. It is really encouraging that now there is a real collaborative feel to the work that's being done here. And that's developed just in the time that I've been here over the last 4 years.
Well, that's very good to hear. And I hope, because I'm going to be going to Spain in October this year, so Portugal, Spain. So I'm hoping that you'll still be there and I'll be able to catch up and meet you in person, which would be amazing, and meet some of the amazing work that's being done there and the rest of the team. So I'm looking forward to that either way, to meet and see what's happening firsthand and save the Med. So let's hold that thought, because I'll come back to you later and we'll have a bit of more of a
Great.
chat about some of the things that are happening there. But thank you so much. And I think what we'll do now is we'll move to our next speaker, and I'll bring you back into the conversation in a moment.
Okay, great.
Thanks, Dan. So now I'd like to switch to, so Dan is, as he said, he's in Spain. So he's our international representative today, and now I'm moving down into Australia and Plastic Oceans Australasia. We work all over Australia, New Zealand, and the various islands, Philippines, Indonesia, etc. And Dr. Paul Harvey is located in Goulburn, south of Sydney. So we're doing that international, national, and then we'll go a bit more local in a moment. So I'd like to introduce Dr. Paul Harvey. He's an environmental chemist, a scientist, speaker, a podcast presenter. He's the author of an amazing book called, and I've got a copy of your book, which is here, and I look at it often, which is called The Plastology Project, which is a book dedicated to changing people's habits around plastic being more a resource and not looking at it as a waste. And I'll be talking to you a little bit more about that, obviously, in a moment, Paul. But you also are, mostly importantly for us, you are also the you are on our, the coordinator for our technical advisory panel in the science unit at Plastic Oceans Australasia. So for us, it's absolutely wonderful to have you in that space, working in the science team, which is super, super important for the work and the projects that we are working on and delivering. So, Paul, we've met a couple of times. You're a very busy man. You are, you have your foot in many camps. You've got a couple of businesses. You're doing many, many things. But I guess one of the reasons I was really excited to have you as part of the complement today with our incredible conversation, which is so poignant, with it being Environment Day and Ocean Day globally under UNESCO, United Nations, and all of those wonderful names and titles, is I really wanted to know, our work, a lot of the work that we do at Plastic Oceans is very much about plastic and the issues of plastic, the benefits of plastic. But I guess I wanted to talk to you about the plastic pollution and the sense of, are we getting fatigued in I call it the grey space, as opposed to the greens, greenwashing. A lot of people talk about greenwashing. I call it grey washing. And I just feel that the general malaise in our society today is that almost, particularly with the collapse of Red Cycle last year here locally, really has become like a fatigue, and people are like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm over it. I tried so hard. And I just wondered if you could comment on that and talk to me a bit about that.
Yes, Ricky. As we've discussed many times before, there is this. I call it eco fatigue. Others might call it other things. You described as a malaise. It's people are getting tired of hearing about these sorts of big global environmental issues, whether it's plastic pollution, whether it's biodiversity loss, whether it's climate change. We've been through near on 3 years of the COVID pandemic. That took a lot out of people, and we're really struggling to get people back engaged with these um, super important global environmental challenges. And so when we start talking about plastic pollution, a lot of people tend to doze off. I think, oh no, not again. Why do we need to hear more about this? We've solved the problem. But as we just heard from Dan, there's so much that we don't know. There's so many unknowns that we still need to answer in this space that mean that we can't switch off. Now's not the time to switch off. We must absolutely be switching back on and be refocusing ourselves. Yes, we've had the 3 years of the pandemic. It's worn us out, but we need to get back on the horse and moving forward, because at the end of the day, the global environment can't wait. We are seeing enormous changes to the climate. We're seeing habitat loss. We're seeing biodiversity loss. We're seeing all of these grand scale environmental challenges unfolding before our eyes. So now is not the time to switch off. We need to be getting back in there and being enthusiastic about what we're doing and spreading the message to say, hey, these problems are still here. They haven't gone away. We need to be getting on and making real solutions happen now for the future.
Mm. And I mean, question is how do we do that? How do we do that without being able to really be transparent to the public and let them know that this is going to work this time? Because a lot of trust was put into um, arrangements like Red Cycle, and that was a great initiative. But you only need one cog in the supply chain to break, and that system broke. So I think, that's maybe a question for another time, because how do we do that? That's looking at the whole systemic change up and down the supply chain, from community to corporates to businesses to government and back again.
Well, actually, Ricky, to that point, that's one of the great things that POA is currently doing really well, is it's getting out there, it's engaging with schools, it's engaging with businesses and communities, and highlighting that, yes, you might be using plastic, you might be generating a whole lot of waste, but there are ways in which you can reduce that waste today and then also over a period of time, so it doesn't feel like it's an enormous burden. It's actually something achievable and that we can do ourselves and in our communities. And to your point about the trust in community and the general public, and we see the collapse of Red Cycle as really a poignant example of this. People were putting in their soft plastics into this recycling scheme under the understanding that they would be recycled and repurposed into other products, and unfortunately, it didn't eventuate quite that way. But that's not to say that another scheme like that comes along won't be able to achieve that. There's always lessons to be learnt through this process. And while there may have been a stumble on the first time round, if we've learnt from that and we can improve the schemes and the programs and the governance around that, then there's no reason why it can't happen effectively the second time around. And the same with other things. There's so much learning that we're doing as we're moving through this. And again, referencing back to the pandemic, from the start of the pandemic, nobody knew what was going on. And then we're now 3 years further down the track, and we know fairly well what's going on and all of the mechanics of the pandemic. It's the same with plastic pollution and these sorts of solutions, we shall call them. the first time round probably won't be the best. There'll be problems, there'll be challenges. But so long as we learn from that and adjust what we're doing, we will get increasingly better as we move through into the future with these.
Yeah, it's great. It's great, Paul, that you, like me, we look at always the positive side, but you need to, because we have to keep going and we have to keep caring for the planet in whatever way we can. And that's why it's so fantastic that the UN has recognised the environment and ocean day themes to be intertwined with beat plastic pollution and changing tides. I guess with your, I suppose, your scientist hat on a little bit, what sort of, I'm curious to know what sort of research and discoveries, excuse me, have you noticed, or whether it be good, bad, troubling, encouraging, that you've noticed in this space, that to expand on what you just were talking about, what have you noticed in there in the science research section?
Yeah, well, let's deal with the bad first and then come back to the positive. In recent weeks, and this is hot off the press research, we've seen evidence that plastic that is ingested, microplastic particles, so there's really small plastic particles that are ingested by humans when they're eating, can make their way to the human brain in a matter of minutes. Now, that is absolutely phenomenal, because previous to this new research, we knew that plastic could cross into the blood. We knew it could accumulate in lungs, and it's been seen in kidney tissue and those sorts of locations. But this is the first time we're seeing it in the brain. Now, fast forward a few weeks from that, and the United Nations has released a report about the chemicals in plastics. The chemicals that are in plastics are some of the most dangerous industrial chemicals you can fathom. And if you put that in the perspective of there's now plastic in the brain, well, this goes back to what I said a minute ago. There are so many unknowns that we don't yet know that makes us need to not push the brakes on plastic and the conversation on plastic, but in fact, push the accelerator and get going, because the warning signs are there that we better get a move on to start answering these questions. Otherwise, who knows what the outcome for the future will be. So as an environmental chemist and somebody who works in the environmental and human health space, that concerns me particularly, because we're getting now more and more data that says, yes, plastic is a bigger problem than we initially first thought, and it's a bigger problem for human health than was first perceived. So the doom over, let's get some sunlight. There's actually some really cool research as well that's coming out about how you can process plastic using the natural world. So organisms, enzymes, algae are all there that are helping to break down certain types of plastic. And again, research hot off the press out of Sydney just recently, using a fungus to break down high density polyethylene plastic, if I remember correctly. Now, that is just fantastic, because it means that if you have a whole lot of plastic in a landfill or some other commercial facility that you otherwise can't deal with, and it ends up going to fill that hole in the ground, the landfill, well, now using some of these new emerging technologies and techniques, we can treat that plastic in such a way that it either reduces its overall mass, or hopefully in the future, we might be able to change that plastic into something else completely different that is maybe even beneficial to the environment. Maybe.
Or at least non-harming,
That's right.
and neutral, so it's not actually damaging not just our health, but also not damaging marine and other plant health, etc. So I mean, that's really yeah, it's great. And I have read a little bit on that, and it's those sort of things are good, and there is a lot of science technology out there, and as you know, being on the technical advisory panel, I guess just quickly, just to round out our little chat, and we can come back to some more things later, is how do you feel that then the work that you're doing with us at Plastic Oceans Australasia through the technical advisory panel, the projects we're working on, do you think that those will be able to help in the plastic space in particular, and with us focusing on solutions and helping to inform policy. As you know, we are on the International Plastics Treaty, for example, and many other areas where we have a voice. I just wanted to get a quick snapshot from you and what you think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. We have an incredible team that works with POA and on the technical advisory panel, and incredibly diverse from government to researchers spread across the country. And the work that we are doing is groundbreaking, cutting edge, and it's going to be, as we start to see a lot of this research published, it's going to be the caliber of work that hits the media and the news headlines for, well, the gloomy reasons, but also the positive reasons. And I'm really excited about what the next 6 to 12 months has to offer in terms of the research and the knowledge that's coming out of POA. So watch this space is what I'd say there.
Well, thank you. And I know that we've got, we're nearly finished a microplastics research piece as well about fish in Sydney Harbour. So yeah, there's lots of really good things going there. So thank you so much. Well, what we'll do, Paul, is I'll come back to you soon. I'm just now going to go to our third guest today, and then we'll all come together for a chat. So it's my great pleasure to introduce Nicola Chollis. And Nicola is a graduating marine scientist, ocean activist, World Ocean Day intern, a photographer as well, and co-host of Green Style podcast, which I know well because I was very lucky to be one of your guests a little while ago when we did a chat about fast fashion and things, which was really great. Nicola, I feel like your wisdom is well more than 21 years. You've done so much and you've been around in this space doing so many amazing things. I know you're a Cypriot Australian, and I know that your passion for the ocean probably surpasses mine, which is pretty hard to beat, but there you go. You're passionate about the planet, blue planet, sustainability, obviously, and the importance of investing in the circular economy, which we talk about, as you know, through education with what we do in Plastic Oceans with the our EPIC program, for example. And I know that you're very much an advocate and really like to take action, and you are very concerned about the connectedness with what we do on the planet and the universal connectedness of us with planet ocean. So I suppose with all of that, what I'd like to ask you is, I find you a very empowering person in the youth space. I have children your age, and I just find you highlight and encompass people from all walks of life in your work that you're doing and who you are with. And I wanted to sort of get a bit of an insight from you of what the importance is of that across the board, and why youth matter, and how you see it progressing. Kind of two questions.
Thank you so much for that introduction, and for having me on this conversation. I think we hear it a lot. Youth are the future, and you see young people from all different backgrounds and all different circumstances voicing and demanding and showing up to the table, not with just ideas, but action, true, tangible action, within not just what we call this environmental space, but across the board on all humanitarian issues. And obviously, youth aren't the only ones doing this incredible work for our planet and our peace, but I think it's important to be highlighting and empowering youth from all different backgrounds. Yes, because we are the future. Yes, because this is our future, but also the intention is pure. It's an intention that is coming from a place of love and compassion rather than status and ego and money. And I also think it's important to recognize the consciousness that young people have and the sort of deep care and desire to create a planet much, much better than the one we have now.
I think it's very inspiring to hear you talk about that, and I think that we as individuals, I wonder, even being in it and having lived it pretty much my whole life, I wonder how do you see that we can make pockets of change now within our environment and communities, given, the developing world, the developed world, the challenges that all countries are facing, whether it be economic, whether it be social, whether it be environmental. How do you see that we can, as individuals, create those pockets?
Yeah, I really like that question because it's something I'm really passionate about. And that's people finding and pursuing their innate dreams and passions and their gifts. So, no matter what workplace or environment, community, school, home, whatever it is, no matter what you're a part of or where you're a part of, the key to creating that change is within you. And I think having a passion for whatever it is you have a passion for creates such a large ripple around you, and half the work is already done. That's why whether you're passionate about spreading awareness, education on plastic pollution, the atrocities of overfishing, or even if you just love the ocean and going for a walk in your local park or your nature reserve, or maybe you see something in your workplace that you could change, creating that change within your community is simple once you understand the reason you value what it is you're wanting to change. Um, I can say on behalf of my peers and within like the marine science community, the environmental space, and within our communities, that getting someone to change their behavior by showing them and telling them that, here are the facts and this is good and this is bad doesn't really create any momentum. And you might feel concerned for a little while, but life doesn't always exactly give you the space to concern yourself with these things that are not in your immediate circle.
Mm.
So creating value is the reason to switching from plastic to reusable, or creating value is in understanding that, climate change is in fact on our front doorstep and affecting us in a myriad of ways. That's where behavior can change by finding and sharing that innate value of creating that change within your environment. And I just want to quickly relate back to Dan here, because being a cinematographer, part of your job, arguably the most significant part of your job, is to create value for your viewers. And it's all pretty and well to show how beautiful our ocean is, but it takes it to another level when you're evoking emotion and ultimately creating value for your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know that you're, you love scuba diving, and you love doing underwater photography as well. And I know with our film, which is the premise of how we started at Plastic Oceans, the movie A Plastic Ocean, even though that was released, at the beginning of 2017, it's still all these years later, it's still shown and used, and we still use it as a powerful resource in our education programs that we're doing with schools and communities, businesses, etc. I think it's a really valid point, and I suppose the connection then of no blue, no green, which is the title that we've used today for our chat, is obviously something that you have that very strong connection with. I just wonder how the importance to recognise that as a connection. I wonder what's the main thing that you would say is that link between the big blue
Yeah,
and the green.
yeah. On so many levels, both Dan and Paul have touched on this idea of connection. And I guess the theme, no blue, no green, really sums it up pretty literally. Without our ocean, 70% of our planet, and creating every second breath we take, and connecting us all. Without her, our beautiful blue, we honestly wouldn't be here. And for so long, we've failed to recognize that the ocean isn't infinite and that we can, in fact, deplete our ocean to a very unsustainable level. And that when we do let things into our drains and into our river system, it does go somewhere, runs directly into the lungs of our planet, our ocean. And I spoke about value before, but connection is another huge part of this equation, and recognizing that we are living on a living planet is so important. This planet is one giant ecosystem with so many intricate and complex systems running through it. One issue in Asia or South America can have a very dramatic effect on people and our ecosystem here in Australia, and vice versa. So I guess to sum it up, because I could go on and on, it's so important to recognize this connection between blue, our ocean, and green, land, if you will, because ultimately they aren't separate from each other, and each can only exist because of one another.
Really well said. And on that note, what we'll do is we'll bring our other guests on together, and we'll actually, I think it's a great time to have a little question time together. So if I can invite back Dan and Paul, and I guess overall, I have a question that I'd like to ask you all, which you probably could talk about for hours, but we only have a short time. So my question to all of you is, if you could wave a magic wand, if you had a magic wand, and I gave you a magic wand, pretend, what would be the one action you would implement today to ensure positive change can happen? Even if it's a dream, even if it's not reality, what would that be? So I'll start with you, Dan, because you were at the beginning of the chat.
Sure. I think probably mine would be, because at the moment, if you want to try and do something in the ocean, you've got pretty much free reign. But if we have to prove now that something is doing damage to the ocean for it to stop. So my magic one thing would be that nothing is allowed to happen in the ocean. You have to prove that it's not going to damage it to be able to do it. Fishing, drilling, whatever it is. That would be my magic one.
Fantastic. I love that. Really, really great. In line with who you are and what you do. Paul, what would be yours?
Great question, and I probably would ask for many things. I think the most pressing at the moment is for what I call silly plastics to disappear. So, you know, single-use sachet plastics and water bottles and all of those types of things where they don't make sense to be used. They're not necessary. Of course, there are always some applications where these things are necessary, but for the broad majority, they don't need to be there. And it's those silly plastics that are causing the majority of the environmental pollution issues that we see. So if we can wave our wand and get rid of those from supply chains, that would do a whole lot to achieve some of the solutions that we're all trying to get to in this conversation.
Yeah, I totally agree. That would be one of my magic wand moments as well. And Nicola, what about yourself?
Such a hard question. I would probably say I think it would be really amazing if everybody in the world could experience the underwater world, for example. Yeah, I think, again, going back to sort of value, once you see the incredibleness of this underwater world that we're talking about, it's hard not to care about it and to have some sort of inspiration from it. So I'd say that if I could.
Yeah, really good answer. I remember many years ago when I left school, and I always used to say, if everybody was given a round the world ticket for 3 months by our government to go and travel overseas and could see how the other half lives, we would come back to Australia really appreciating the most amazing what we have here, which the beauty, the landscapes, our incredible pristine beaches, the wonderful environment that we live in here. And that was a long time ago. And I guess I still wish that we could do that. So if I had a wish for, particularly for the youth today, is that they could really understand that what we've got here in Australia is so precious, like Ningaloo Reef, the Great Barrier Reef, so many other landmarks that we've got. It would be really good. I suppose that leads me to I'm interested also. And I'll start with you, Dan. Another quick question: do you have any regrets, or I call them a aha moment, where you wished you'd done something differently along your journey to date in caring for the planet? And if it was, how would you fix it if you could have back then? Whenever it would, it might have been when you were, 10 years old. It doesn't matter, but I feel that sometimes that's really helpful with our journey for others moving forward.
Sure. I guess I don't have any regrets, I guess, on like the career path kind of thing, because that's, I don't find that very helpful when I'm kind of planning things. It took me quite a long time to realize that this was affecting everything, though, I would say. I didn't really get involved in the conservation world till I was 26, which is quite a long time to kind of be obsessed with sharks, which I have been since I was a kid, and not actually then kind of explore more about, oh, I wonder if sharks are all right or if they need my help. So I probably would say that my perhaps regret would be not to try and do more earlier. And that's actually the encouraging thing now when I speak in schools, as I'm sure you guys do as well, is that actually kids are already so aware of these issues. There's nothing really I can teach them now about sharks. They already know, which I find really encouraging.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's great to hear. Paul, what about you?
Yeah, actually, my aha moment is similar to Dan's. Actually, it took me a long time to figure out that the change isn't going to happen with the older generation, and I mean that with the utmost respect. It's the young kids and the youth generations that are going to drive the change, because they are the people that want something different for the world in which they're moving into and are going to be leaders in. Whereas the current leaders are in the world that they 20, 30 years ago had created for themselves on their trajectory. So my thinking now, I've shifted my focus in many ways, is yes, have the conversations with the older generation, because that's part of what we do. We have to do that. But it's the younger generation where I'm most excited to speak to and engage with, because that's where the real action and change for the future happens.
I like that. That's so good. Take the wisdom and the knowledge from people ahead of you and use that to help drive change with people coming up through the ranks. That's terrific. Nicola, what about yourself?
There are so many. I think, I mean, I agree with both Dan and Paul so deeply, but I think the biggest for me has probably been believing that there is nothing that can be done with, all of this devastation that we hear all the time around us. It's very easy to fall into that void of thinking, well, what's my little job going to do? What's my little voice going to say? So yeah, I would say that.
So, as in that's been a regret, or
Yeah, I would say thinking that there's nothing that can be done would be a regret, because there absolutely is so
yeah,
much that can be done.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that's really insightful, and I think, to be fair, I should open this up to each of you and see if you would like to ask a question to each other, or even myself, about what we're talking about today. So open it up to whoever would like to jump in and ask us something.
I've got a question.
Great.
I guess this one has to do with Dan's work. I'm actually a huge fan, and I've watched your TED Talk a couple years ago, and followed your work for quite some time. And it's funnily the path I wanted to go down since, like, before I was introduced to your work, and I want to study shark behavior and be an underwater cinematographer. So it's so cool. But I guess the question is specific to your work with sharks, great white sharks. What's been the biggest challenge for you in terms of battling society's behavior and views on sharks? And whilst learning and then exploring and sharing the behavior in one of the most beautiful creatures, which is great whites.
Wow. Yeah, I think a lot has changed just in the last, again, sort of 5-6 years in that regard. I remember when I first started kind of getting myself involved in this area, that anytime any shark was mentioned in the media, it was always done with such aggression, and like we all know the language that they use, like it's absolutely insane. And what I've noticed now is there seems to be, even when an article like that does come out, if you look down the comments, all the response from people is actually positive. And I don't remember that always being the case. So I think things have changed quite a lot. I'm often quite encouraged by that. I used to like try and contact journalists when they were writing bad articles about sharks and tell them what I thought about their article and things like that. But actually, I don't need to anymore, because people do it themselves on the comment section of where the article is posted. So yeah, generally, I find actually now it's quite encouraging that people are viewing sharks in a slightly better way than they did just 10 years ago.
That's awesome. Thank you.
I actually had a question back to you, Nicola, which is I find that plastic pollution is probably a very easy one to see, and it's a very tangible one to do something about yourself, like recycle better or don't buy single-use plastics, things like that. I was wondering what your thoughts are for the younger generation. What's the environmental issue that's the hardest to get a grasp of or to do something about? And what's the solution?
Oh my gosh. The
You don't
solution?
want much, doesn't want much, does he?
Yeah, in 30 seconds or less.
Oh boy. Oh gosh. I mean, you have to be honest, it's different all over the world with what you're facing. But I think for me personally, and within my, my age group, I would say climate change, because it's such a huge issue that you don't know what to do. Like there's thousands of solutions that can be done, but it doesn't seem significant enough to stop the globe from warming. So, I mean, I don't have any solutions other than all of the incredible work that organizations are doing and just going ham on that. But yeah, I'd say that is probably most overwhelming and has caused me and my peer group a lot of eco anxiety. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad we're here to try and help, Nicola, with Plastic Oceans Australasia. And I'm glad that you're here with us. So that's great. Does anybody else have a question they'd like to ask? Paul, do you have a question you'd like to ask anyone?
I have a question actually for all three of you. And give yourself, I don't know, a sentence or two. What piece of positive, inspirational advice would you share to the younger generation on this topic around oceans, around any of what we've been discussing?
Why don't you answer your question first?
I was hoping you would. I think for me, the one positive thing that I would say is the space that we work in. While yes, there is some doom and gloom from time to time, we get to work with incredibly motivated, enthusiastic, energetic people who have an absolute passion for the world around us. And we get to work in some amazing locations. And that just drives us more and more and more to preserve the glorious world that is around us. So I would say to anybody that's thinking of maybe heading down a path of studying the environment in some way, shape, or form, absolutely do it, because we need people like you in the future that can take over our positions when we're in that old age group where people don't want to listen to us anymore.
Yep. I honestly could not agree more with that statement. You took it right out of my mouth. Yeah, this space is, like you said, so incredible and collaborative, and everyone is so passionate about what they do and wants to work together. And yeah, it's just you get to see incredible places around the world and be a part of a mission that, we all need to be a part of. Yeah.
Mine would be that you can find the magnificence of nature right where you are. You don't have to go halfway around the world to do that. That's probably hard to hear from someone that's a British guy, but the reality is actually even in the UK, we have some pretty amazing nature and wildlife. You can find amazing nature everywhere you are, and I think once you are a little bit connected to it, that's when you really then start getting passionate about it. And that's usually the story for everyone that gets involved in the environment, is they've had a connection with it at some point. So start by getting that connection, just get out there into the nature, into the ocean, whatever it is, and see what it does to you.
Great answer. And I guess that segues really well for me in that at our organisation, and with me also myself, with my background having been brought up in the plastic manufacturing recycling space for many decades and seeing slow transition and awareness, I think the one thing I would say, which we talk about a lot when we're doing our education delivery, is bring everybody you know on the journey with you to show one little thing that can make a difference. So every child in the school has connections with, possibly, or at home or wherever, whether they're at school or not at school, about 450 people, each person, going through their school years from 5 to 18, about 450 connections. So my advice and my messaging is just talk a lot, take the journey, show your little wins that you've done, whether it be underwater, on the land, anywhere that it is. Talk about it and share it and communicate. Lots and lots of communication to drive that change. And I guess I'm going to have to move on just because of the timing, but this brings me nicely to wrapping up what we've talked about as a group. And I actually would like to invite everybody that's listening today, as well as yourselves, to enter. Every year, Plastic Ocean Australasia has a film competition that we run, and it's called Ocean in Motion. And this year, of course, we're delighted, Dan, that you're going to be one of our judges. And we have got some great prizes and lots of opportunities for people when they enter. So what I'd like to do is show just a very small 2-minute video link of the winners from last year and what they achieved, so that people can see, and it tells the story about how you enter, what to do, all the rest of it, all the mechanics. But that's open until the entries up right through till the end of, pretty much the middle to the end of October of this year. So I'll just pause for a moment so we can show the video.
Whoa, what is this? A piece of plastic?
We are the Redwood Green Team.
We believe that we can change people's mindsets and show them that plastic is not waste but a resource.
Anula Primary School joined the Plastic Oceans Australasia organisation in 2021.
We are proposing that Barwon Heads Primary students and staff do not bring single-use plastic to school.
So, what made you want to start Plastic Collective?
John Monash Science School believes that every individual and business have a role to play in decreasing the accumulation of plastic and waste in our environment.
In order to reduce the items going to landfill and reduce our impact on our environment, we have introduced paper recycling bins and commingled recycling bins.
We discovered that we needed a 3-bin system that was previously not here,
We collected the school's plastic and sorted it into different categories.
This equates to more than 300,000 pieces of plastic per school year. That is way too much. We want zero.
We're a collection point for bottle cap lids. People around town can donate their bottle cap lids, and so we can collect them. So as you can see, this bin here is full of bottle cap lids. So one day we can collect them all and recycle them into other stuff.
The Brentwood Green team designed a turtle using plastic bottle caps and plastic bags.
This collage was successful in promoting the idea that what we litter ends in our oceans.
Well, I hope you all found that inspiring and inviting, and we'd love you to come on and join the film competition, which really shows how you can make a difference in 5 minutes or less. So I hope you join the journey with us. I think I'd like to just close out to obviously say the conversation's been amazing. There's so much that we could continue on and chat about, and I know that if people would like to hook up and reach out to you, we will be providing your details on the screen at the end of our recording. I would like to obviously thank you all for being with us today, and I know, Dan, you've had to get up early in Spain, and for Paul and Nicola and myself, we're local here in Australia, but we really do appreciate that, and your insights have been really interesting for all of us. I want to thank everybody here that's listening to the recording that we've made for you. We hope you've been inspired and you can do something in your local area, obviously. I would like to just do a very quick shout out to some of our supporters, for without them we wouldn't be able to do what we do, being Sapatis, Rekindi and Recycle Mats and Victoria Woods. All of them are involved and behind the scenes helping us with what we're doing at the moment with World Ocean Day, World Environment Day and Oceans in Motion. So I wanted to just do a little thank you to them. And also, obviously, welcome and celebrate this next month, the whole month of June. Even though it's World Ocean Day and World Environment Day for the first week, we know that it takes a long time for people to make change. We really hope that you will enjoy this wherever it is that you're watching it. And until next time, thank you so much, and thank you so much again to our special guests. And we'll see you all again soon. Thank you.